I remember coming. Y'all got it?
Yep.
Hot damn. Now the question is, how do I get it back once it's recorded? But that's for them to figure out, I guess. All right. Everybody good?
Yep.
All right, welcome. This is the Directing for Television panel for the Atlanta Film Festival's Creative Conference. My name is Angela Barnes. I am an Atlanta-based television director. I've directed things like Loot, Atlanta, the upcoming Marvel show Ironheart, Blindspotting, Mythic Quest, some other things. I also am the creative force behind Get Your Booty to the Poll, which was a viral video that I shot back in 2020 for the election. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited for the folks that we have here today. Some very experienced and interesting and awesome directors that some who I've just met, some who I've known for a while. We have Daniel Willis, Emmanuel Osei-Kuffour, Oyegun, and Tchaiko Omawale. Let's go ahead around the room. We can tell a little bit about who we are, where we came from, starting with Dan. Right. We're gonna go in different ways. I forgot which order we said we're gonna go. Let's go with Dan. Dan, take it away.
We can roll with it. We'll improv. It'll be great.
I'm used to being behind the camera. I'm sorry. I'm nervous too. Like I've done these a lot and I never get used to them. Go ahead.
I feel like you're so brave for taking this on. So I could never. Dan Willis. I'm from Chicago. I live here in Los Angeles. Television writer and director. I've directed things like Grey's Anatomy and The Blacklist and Cruel Summer, stuff like that. And really happy to be here and talking to everyone about directing.
Right, Kay?
Yes, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
Hi, it's so good to meet everyone. I would actually consider myself more of a writer. I've directed TV, but only on the show that I was on, This Is Us. And so I've done 4 episodes of This Is Us, but I'm more of a TV writer, executive producer. I'm on an overall with 20th, and I have several things in development. I also write features as well, so I'm doing that a bunch. But yeah, thrilled to be here and talk about all of it.
All right, Tchaiko?
Hi, I'm Tchaiko. I'm based in LA, but from many, many different countries, originally Jamaica. And I'm a director of films, TV, documentaries. And I started in TV with Queen Sugar, then Cherish the Day, then did Sacrifice for BET, and just did Good Trouble. Happy to be here.
And Emmanuel?
Hello, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm born and raised in Houston, Texas. Parents are Ghanaian. Spent about 7 years of my life living and working in Tokyo. My first episode of TV was In the Dark, which came after my first feature, Black Box. Since then, I've done episodes of Star Trek, Discovery, Shogun, The Recruit, and The Midnight Club.
All right, so this is a show about directing for television, but I want to talk a little bit about how we got started. So like my first paid directing job was, I was a first AD for a long time. So I was on the show that I was an AD. That was like my first TV job. What was y'all's first paid gig? And just jump in whenever you feel like it. And how did you get it?
My first paid gig,
go
ahead, Dan.
Go ahead, Tchaiko.
My first one was a commercial for Procter & Gamble, My Black is Beautiful with Yvonne Orji. And I got it because of an editor, Shannon Davis, who liked my work and my feature. And she's recommended me for several of the commercials that I've done.
Shannon Baker Davis.
Yes,
she's awesome.
yes,
Love her.
yes.
I'm working with her right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
On what?
On Ironheart.
She's doing Ironheart?
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I know Sam Bailey, but I didn't realize Shannon was doing Ironheart. Very cool.
Yeah, brought her in. So Emmanuel, what was your first gig?
My first gig was my first feature, Black Box. And I got that because of a thesis film I did at NYU called Born With It, which was about a mixed race Japanese Ghanaian boy, which won at Toronto and played internationally for a few years. I ended up getting an agent out of it, got into the ABC Directors Program, and I actually thought I was going to get my first episode from Blumhouse, but they told me they had this script that they thought would be interesting to me. to try to pick up. And so I did my take and ended up winning the job.
Cool. Dan?
My first one was actually this independent pilot. A friend of mine from film school in Chicago had an idea to make a pilot, and they brought me on to co-write it and eventually direct it. At the time, I think I was a showrunner's assistant on Grey's Anatomy. So I had to leave that job to go back to Chicago to kind of try my hand at directing at that level. And it worked out pretty well. It turned into my sample, which got me into some fellowships and eventually my first directing job.
Cool. So we talk about, a few guys have like feature experience. So I know there's documentaries, there's commercials, there's features. Specifically about directing for television, what are the things that kind of differ from those other genres of directing? Just for the people who don't, just think directing is just like you're still saying action. What's the difference when you're on a TV show?
You're a guest when you're on a TV show, as opposed to the architect and interior designer of your own home. And I guess it depends on the kind of features you do. Mine was like an independent, so I was in full control of everything. But on TV, you have to flex your diplomatic muscles a lot more.
Okay. So like, and Kay, as someone who's been an EP on a show, little show, This Is Us. So the relationship between the person who's running the show and the director, like how does that relationship work versus like in a feature film when there's just a producer?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, TV is a writer's medium. It just is what it is. And so whenever you have your guests, you're as collaborative and engaging and all of that stuff. My experience was different just because you write the episode, you're directing it, all the crew. So it really feels like a different space to be in, where there's a lot more, you're collaborative, but it's a bit more, they're more deferential across the board in that way, just because they know that this is a particular vision. But no, it's great. I think one of the things that I love so much about working with guest directors that come on board is just sort of, they have a new spin to it. They're always very inquisitive about what, how the bells and whistles go on. They, want to do a great job. They want to hit the ground running. They also feel a little bit like, since it's a moving beast, in a lot of different ways, that they can't break anything, and we're always very careful to make sure that they feel like that shouldn't be a concern. But yeah, I was even gonna say, like, I love this because Tchaiko, my first show was Queen Sugar. Emmanuel, we met because of your amazing short film, and Chinaka is one of my best friends. So I'm just sort of like laughing at the whole, like, just internally, I love all of the connections there. But yeah, no, but again, TV directing, you are usually a guest. I haven't had the experience of being on someone else's show, and I'm sort of, I don't want to do that because I don't consider myself a journeyman director at all. But I am very impressed by walking onto a set that has been experiencing and knowing I have 8 days of sets, if they're 8 days, and then I have like 2 weeks of, post, if they're 2 weeks, to really sort of do something, and I'm on to the next one. It's a very, I admire it, and hats off.
So it being a writer's
2 weeks.
I know, I was like,
2 weeks.
Like 2 weeks.
4 days,
I need to get on
4
that
days
show.
of post.
4 days. See, I'm using it based on the producing side, because we have 2 weeks to do it.
Yeah.
So when we get a director's cut, we have to even get, like, sometimes our directors were always so like nervous that they were like, just do the cut yourself. You're 72 minutes of an episode.
Oh,
This is everything that we did. And we were like, okay, and now you've got to go in and do the thing. We were very specific. We didn't like people to come in on time because our show was all time periods, all of that stuff. So we always wanted to kind of shape it ourselves. So that's why it's an interesting game. I don't envy it. You guys are brave people.
So at being a writer's medium, like, what are some of the mistakes, Kay, on your side as a producer, and then for the rest of us as directors, mistakes that you've seen or have made yourself in terms of trying to get the job done when you're a guest in somebody else's house? Nobody's made mistakes?
I
could speak
feel
to this.
like I was a showrunner's assistant for a while. And so I was in prep meetings and I was in meetings with the showrunners after they watched director's cuts, and I watched cuts and I looked at notes and all those things. I feel like directors kind of make a mistake when they try to make the show their own in a way that is inappropriate, right? You're coming in, it's like, okay, this is, I'm trying, it's my version of the show. And I feel like what you really want to do is kind of, capture the essence of what the show is, and then make your episode in a way that kind of sings with what's already has been established. So trying to change what the show is, I feel like puts you at a disadvantage. I'm a big believer in, like, if I come into a show that's been around for 2 or 3 years or much longer than that, I really want to try to digest as much of it as I can, so all of my ideas feel organic to what the show is. And that's made for like a pretty seamless experience for me.
When I was still ADing, I was shocked when I would have a director who would ask me questions, and I would be like, have you watched the show before?
Right.
and they're like, oh, I didn't have time. And I'm like, you really should probably watch the show before you start planning on how to do everything, so you can keep up with
this
it.
was complete overkill, but before I did my first episode of the Blacklist, which was my first episode ever, I watched 100 episodes of the Blacklist. Like, that's insane. You should not do that. You don't need to do that. But that's where my head was.
But Darren, you've done now how many episodes of the Blacklist? I feel like you're like a resident Blacklist director now.
I did 4. At some point you got to move on to a new show. But I wanted the crew to know that I respected what they did, that I understood what the show was about, that I understood how they kind of do things. And I feel like your experience is much better when you come in and you can show them that in a way that makes them feel like they have a collaborator who understands them.
Cool. So how do you guys, as guests, when you're coming in and talking to various crew members, and specifically actors, when you're working with an actor, especially on shows that have been on for 2 or 3 seasons, they know their characters sometimes better than the writing crew knows their characters. So how do you wrap your head around giving direction to someone who's been like hitting the same mark in the same set for 3 or 4 seasons in a row? Or do you?
Well, I think every show is different because all performers are different and show cultures are different. I have a practice where when I get a job, I will ask if I can have the actor's information, and I will get in touch with them and say, introduce myself, say, I'd love to chat with you for 5, 10 minutes to find out how you like to work, to, share who I am. How can I be most of service to you? On some shows, I get the numbers and we talk, or I, text. On my last show, they didn't give out numbers, so I emailed. But I always like to talk to the performers before I actually see them on set. So there's just some sort of human connection. And I don't know, again, diplomacy, I feel like is the best word. I grew up as a diplomat's kid, so that's like why my language is like that. But diplomacy, I feel like is the thing, because you have to be able to be like water and be fluid, because you don't know if someone's having a bad day. You don't know what the politics are behind the show. And I don't think there's like one way. You just have to be flow.
Yeah, personally, when I'm working on a show, is very similar to you. I ask to have a conversation. I ask to have a face-to-face, either over Zoom or over coffee. Often, like, I like to prep a lot, and some shows don't like a lot of prep in terms of like, really having exact shot lists. Some people want you to actually be more organic on the day. But I'm a heavy prepper, and so that also includes like a script analysis. And so I would really like to talk to the actors to figure out where their head is at before I go and like make a plan myself in terms of like what the intention of the characters are from scene to scene. And it really helps to know what my number 1, number 2, and number 3 are already thinking, so I could be in line with them before I even get to set. That's just me though.
Wait, can I ask a question? So you actually sit, they'll give you that much time, like sit and you go scene by scene through the whole episode?
Sometimes.
Wow,
on show,
that's amazing. Wow.
On Shogun, it was like that. On Shogun, not every show is like that.
Do they not all do tone meetings?
The actors aren't in the tone meetings.
Actors aren't in
Tone
tone
meetings,
meetings.
and I'll be honest, a lot of execs don't really know how to do tone meetings.
Oh no.
Yeah, so
I've
like
been on shows where they're like, well, we don't really know what is that, like, what does that mean? And I'm like, oh God, this is not.
I'm impressed that you guys are working with actors who have read the script before the first day of shooting. So that's awesome.
no, like on a lot of the shows that I was working on, like specifically Shogun, you're working with non-English speaking actors. You're working with actors that like to do a lot of homework beforehand. And so, yeah, they had a lot of opinions, especially since it was an American showrunner, an American crew working on very, very Japanese material. They just wanted to make sure they got it right, and I understood it. So, not every actor was like that on this show, but most of the time I got an hour with each actor, you know.
Wow,
but then I'd also have the tone meeting really, really early, like on day 1 or 2 of prep, so that I'm making sure that we're all in line with what the showrunner wants.
This is like a dream.
I know. I know. I'm like,
tone meeting on day 1 of prep. Oh my goodness.
I mean, sometimes what I've learned in my short experience is that sometimes you just ask for a tone meeting early and then they'll give it to you. Not every showrunner's like that, but I've been lucky to have showrunners that do that.
You call it a pre-tone. I find they're a little bit open to it. They don't want to do that. If you'd say it's the same meeting twice, they get all weird about it. But like you're like, well, let's do a pre-tone so I know that I'm prepping in the right direction, and then we can have a tone right before it when we know everything's all baked in and it is what it is, and then we can have a tone about what that is scene by scene. But so let's talk about prep though. Like a typical. Let's talk. Most of you guys do hour longs, right? Everybody's hour, right? Okay, so hour long show. You have 7 or 8 days of prep generally, sometimes 6, depending on the show. What does it look like? How does it start? What are the things that are kind of typical to every show? What are the things that are specific that you do on your own? Let's get into it.
I'm a heavy prepper too. I'm big on like Excel sheets. I do my character breakdowns, scene by scene. I do my story breakdown scene by scene. I'm a shot lister. I do overheads. And then I proceed not to reference those things once we start shooting usually. But it makes me feel confident to have a plan. And I feel like it messages to the production that they have a person who they can feel confident about. And I feel like that makes the whole prep experience a lot better if you can I'm not showing people all of these things, but it's just a part of my process because I want them to feel good. Because I feel like you get the best work and the best collaboration out of people who have confidence in this guest director who's coming through.
Everybody else do these too?
Yeah, I'll rep for the filmmaking moms. The very first thing that I do is organize childcare for the entire day. Because do you have kids, Kay?
No, but I'm thrilled that you said that.
Oh, the childcare or for the moms?
Yeah, no, the childcare, because that's something that was really big for us because we were a very family friendly space.
Really? I want to hear more about that when the time is appropriate.
We had a nursing station. It was a whole thing. We had like 4 writers.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was a very big, we had like 900 babies on our show. So we had to like have triplets and twins and all of that stuff. So we made sure that everyone could nurse safely on set because we had so many Pearson kids born.
That was just for the cast, or that was for the crew too?
That wasn't even cast because most of our cast, I think Mandy was the only one who had a kid during our show, but we had actors who were babies. We had a lot of baby people on the show. So their mothers would have stations. So like the parents of our actors had stations to take care of their kids. And we had a lot of writers who also had stations to take care of their kids. So daycare was a big part of our whole thing. That was a big thing that was rare. So hearing that, I'm very happy to hear that. If you would have had a space on our set, because that was really big.
The childcare comes out of my pay. It's not organized it's not organized by the show. But it lets me know that when I create my own show, that is something that, I'm very interested in sort of the shifting of our industry being more inclusive, not just along racial lines, but also disability, mothers, But anyway, so I get childcare from like 8 to like 7 p.m. If I'm out of town, I have to organize flights for my mom, for my partner, along with COVID. I'm saying all of this because this is the stuff that's like very important if you're a woman and if you have a family. I organize special things during COVID so that my kid is exposed to the least amount of COVID when we're flying. I pay extra for that. And then when I get to town, I know this is not strict stuff, but it's very important. When I get to town, I figure out where all the healthy food is and I make my food plan because I need to have energy when I'm working and I need to be healthy when I'm working. And so in terms of the like more literal like film planning, I do have a spreadsheet for that breaks down for every department what I need and like scene by scene. And then I have a different spreadsheet that arcs out story A, B, and C and like what each character is doing. And that I put into my scriptation so that whenever I'm on set, when there's there's a scene with like 2 actors, I know what each actor did the previous scene when they were with, when they're with their scene partner. And then I do overheads, shot list. It depends on the show. I like to work with the DP for the shot list, but on some shows they want you to just come. On my Sacrifice show with Paula Patton, one of the first things they said to me in the interview was like, we really need people who can be fluid. Like you can do your shot list, but you have to be able to like on the go. If Paula wants to do something different because she's the EP and the number 1, you have to be able to flow, which is great from my indie filmmaking. I'm able to do that. I think that's like a positive as opposed to me coming up through TV directing. And then
prep helps with that though, right? I mean, I think for me, with like what Daniel was saying, like I prep a bunch, I over prep so that in the day when you were joking about, and then I don't look at it, but it's so that you can not look at it in the day and use the force and just kind of see what the scene is telling you to do and then go with that. But then if everyone's like, oh, I don't really know what, then you have a plan.
I love that. Yeah, totally. And then I'll also in addition to like watching the episodes and all the seasons before, I also watch different films. So then I start taking references with my phone, both video and photographs, because I sort of have some long COVID and motherhood brain. So I have to have a lot of visual references to make sure that my collaborators understand where I'm coming from. And I'll email that stuff. And then the night before the shoot, I'll also email out my overheads to the AD and camera operator. They mostly never read them, but yeah, that's my prep. Oh, and when I'm in some place like New Orleans, what I do for my energy is I get private twerking classes to help with my energy of working for so long. Anyway, I find things like that very important to be considered as part of prep. It's like how you can be healthy and joyful.
I love that.
So that when you're talking about what you're going to do when you're running your own show, one of the things that Marvel did, which I was really impressed with, is they have a concierge for the cast and the directors and everything. So when I needed somebody to babysit my kids, they helped me find a babysitter. When I needed to find a place for the trainer, they helped me find a trainer when they did. Because there's things that like if I had a regular 9 to 5, like we don't need, right? Like I don't. But when you literally have no time to do anything other than like there's a pie, and when I have 2 kids, I'm a single mom. So there's a pie. So you have this amount of time for work and this amount of time for kids. There's no overlap. So if I add something else, like, okay, let me do the dishes, then that takes time away from either work or kids. Yeah. So I literally subcontract everything when I'm working because I don't have a partner to take care of that stuff for me. So I have someone who cleans the house. I had someone who I used the food service things that would drop off the ready-made meals during the week. So when I didn't have time to cook, they could stick it in the oven and heat up their own food. But it's the same thing, like a lot that outside of the job that you have to consider before you even take the job. And before you even take the job, we were talking about that, I think before you guys got on, they were like, oh, you've never worked in Canada. And I'm like, I know it takes too long for me to get there and back. I can't come home on the weekends if I'm in Canada, so I passed. But I'll be honest, like my doing that for my kids and making sure that I was putting them first has helped my career because I've said no to so much stuff that I only say yes to the stuff that's a level up or the stuff that I love or the stuff that I know I'm going to have a good time and just killing it. And I think I moved up the food chain faster than I would have had if I had gone ahead and taken every job that was offered to me.
I love that.
Wow.
That's dope.
How old are your kids, Angela?
They are 10 and 14.
Wow.
Boys. Ugh.
Yeah.
I have a boy,
Really admire
that.
3-year-old.
Yeah, now it's a little easy. Now they understand. I think it's when kids are younger, they don't always understand what work means. They don't give a shit. They're like, who cares if you're going to work? I want my mom, right? I don't care what work is. I don't care about what money is or whatever. At 10 and 14, they understand. At 10 and 14, they go, they're, or my oldest is like, oh, wait, you have a chance to work on that? That's cool, So, then if they have to go stay with their dad for a little bit, then it's not like it's a big, they see me as abandoning them. But, but the language is important. My sister's a pediatric OT. She was like, if you don't say you have to go to work, say they're making you go to work and you don't want to go to work and you'd rather be with them, but they're making you. So it almost was like, not like that you're being kidnapped. You don't want to traumatize the kid, but I would always make it sound like it was not my choice, that it was something I was being forced to do. And I didn't want to do it. And I told them I wanted to come home and they won't let me come home yet, but they said I'll be home in an hour. And that like shifted everything where when Chris was like 3 or 4, I remember one time I was like, all right, it's Mom and Chris day. And he was just like, I'm sorry, but I have to work. And he literally whipped out his little pretend laptop, his little plastic Fisher Price laptop and was like, but let's talk about that too, just relationships, not just with kids. But, when you're working in this industry, you're putting in long hours. If you're jumping on jobs back to back, you don't see, you may be all over the country, all over the world. What things do you do to help maintain relationships, both with your family, your children, your significant others, your friends? What are the things that you do to kind of keep those things going?
My fiance usually comes out. So it's like, I work in Canada a lot. I worked in New York and Atlanta, all over. And we pretty much like have a kind of a regular thing. Is like that second or third weekend, she just comes out, on that Friday or Thursday, and then just kind of works from the hotel while I'm, off doing my thing. But it's important for us to not be away from each other for so long, because usually like a gig is, 25, 26 days away. And if you're working like fairly kind of steady, that adds up over the course of the year. So we try to definitely do that whenever I'm out of town. And it goes the same way because she's an executive. She travels a lot as well. So that's why I was in Toronto yesterday, just kind of tagging along on her trip too.
That's so good. I've been living in Nigeria now for the last year and some change.
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Are you in Nigeria right now?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
I've been here since end of 2021. And the beautiful thing about being a developer, I came to the States, to LA, because I shot a pilot last year, and I was there for about 8 weeks, 7 to 8 weeks. And then I have another project that we're starting to shoot in June. And so I'll be coming back, at the top of May to sort of prep for that. But it really is, it's something where it's like, I'm very big on, because I'm in a different kind of position, I get to make the stuff. So like, and so we can talk about that also, because I'm in a position now where I'm like picking a director for a pilot. So this will be my second time around picking a director for a pilot. And it's such an interesting thing. But no, I think I prioritize family first. So I prioritize family first. And I think that when you know that your job is not your life, your job is just a job that you use to either, fund your life or be a blessing to the people around you, it gives it perspective and it gives it a sense of joy. But I'm a big fan of people, managing their time well and prioritizing the relationships, because when you're, in your last days, a friend of mine, a former coworker, Don Roos, who had done everything on the planet, he told me when he looked in his house, he's got this like wall of all of his stuff. He realized they're all plastic. And if this house burned down, he would grab his daughter first. And so that was something that was just sort of like, yeah, because that's the priority. And so when he realized that was the case, it made the work that much more fun to do, because he knew that his life wasn't dependent on it. So I'm a big believer in that. So it's like if we're here in Nigeria, we love it. I can write from here when I have to be on set. I'll come back and be on set and do what I have to do. So yeah. Also Zoom. Ciao.
Zoom is a lifesaver.
I'll Zoom room in a heartbeat. I'm like, don't call me to Santa Monica. I'm not going to Marina Del Rey. Like, I love it. It's like you can get so much done just clicking a button that you used to sit in a car for an hour and a half, you know, going from here to here to here to here to here. It's nuts. So I'm glad that no one. Yes, like
or no pants
right now,
or pajamas. Y'all wear pajamas right now.
Workout pants for days. It's terrible, but it's like I love the advent of Zoom. I'm very grateful for it. Very, very grateful for it. But
what I don't love is when we Zoom in the production office and everyone's
right there
on Zoom.
That one.
It's like we should have just stayed home. What is the point of driving to the production office?
That's real. That's real. You can hear the person responding.
Yes, it's ridiculous.
It's like you can just come in here and say that, like, yeah, no, I don't like that. If we're all here and we took the gas, we should be in a room together. We should see each other's. Yeah.
All right. So let's see. Let's talk about self-care. We got into a little bit of that too, about the twerking classes. When you guys finish a job, is there any kind of ritual or anything you do that to take care of yourselves, to take care of your loved ones? That's like an automatic. Like I used to do the Korean spa. I'd say I would steam out and then scrub off everything that touched the show and watch it go down the drain. And then I would go to the next thing. So like, what are the things you guys do to make sure that you take care of yourself so that you can be your best when you're on set?
This is all really good to think about because I'm definitely not doing a Korean spa. I'm definitely not twerking. I'm definitely not looking for healthy food when I get to a location.
Definitely not healthy food.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely gained like 10 pounds in a production. Yes. And the first thing I'm thinking about when I leave is, okay, when am I going to start running again? When am I going to start going to the gym? But then another job comes and I gain 10 more pounds. So this is very good to hear.
You must be young, Emmanuel, because if you keep doing that, you will drop dead, as they say.
I know. I am not young. So it's catching up to me.
That is the one thing I did, like on a regular basis. I was always like a crafty person, but when I was actually on the job directing, I refused to touch crafty. I didn't go anywhere near it because that's such an absent-minded eating. Hi, gorgeous. That was something that was like a conscientious. Don't do it.
Yeah, crafty. I've gotten a lot better with crafty lately because I could tell the negative impact in real time that was happening. It's like I was losing energy. I was just like getting out of control. I didn't like the lack of discipline. So I've really kind of tightened up on crafty. It's just all the other hours of the day that are a problem. But Tchaiko, I am very inspired by you, and I'm going to do better.
Very, very much so. Very much so. Same here. I mean, it's like they're direct. I'm sorry, Angela, but like, you know, I mean, all of us can agree, but like directing is like very, you know, time intensive, you know, and if you're not intentional about like ordering the right food or, you know, going to that restaurant before 9 p.m., you'll end up eating junk food all the time. So. Yeah, working till like 11 p.m. every night.
Yeah. On hard shows and during our lunch break, I'll just go to the trailer and either meditate or like talk to friends and kiki. On certain shows, if I like feel like on my New Orleans Sacrifice, there were a lot of Black girl PAs. So like I would go hang out with them and that would resource me because we'd listen to music and talk about, you know, stuff Black girls talk about. But yeah. Oh, and I have oysters and champagne after every job. That's my reward.
Very nice.
That is very specific. I like that.
Oh, all my friends know oysters and champagne.
I got a restaurant for you. Next time you work in Toronto, let me know. I got a fantastic oysters and champagne specifically restaurant.
Okay, I've never worked in Toronto, but I feel like you're calling this in. There's a show that I want to work on that Emmanuel worked on that I think shoots in Toronto.
Vancouver.
Damn it. Never mind.
But there's something about that ritual that does like reset your mind a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, you know, so what do you guys do when you're you find yourself on a show? Because you know, all this is like, it's like blind dates to me. It's like you talk to someone for 5 seconds and then you show up on the set. and you're like, okay, let's see if this works out. What do you guys talk to me about experiences you guys had where it maybe wasn't a great fit? And okay, you can talk about maybe directors who came in that were not, like, just came in, and it's not that they were bad at what they did, but just didn't quite gel. Like, I remember I was on a show once and I'd be like, okay, we can, it was the first season of the show, it was like this, like the second or third episode, so they hadn't really established a lot of stuff, and I'd be like, oh yeah, we could do this and this, and they'd be like, oh yeah, that's great, but can you also shoot it regular, just like a master, like, can you just shoot it regular? And I'd be like, I mean, I can, but I don't have time to do both. And so what do you do? And I could tell that they were like, we just want it to be this, we want to play it safe, where I'm like, oh, we can do all this cool stuff that's still getting you what you need to get. And they just, so I had to, suck it up, because it's, I'm the nanny, I'm not mom, right? So what are the things, like, what are some situations you guys find yourself in, whether it's, difficult actors, whether it's difficult department heads, whether it's, showrunners who just, sometimes it's a leadership thing. There's people who are really brilliant who just don't understand what managing is about, or how to talk to people. Like, what are some of the things that you've run in, and then how do you manage them when you're in it?
I've personally, my challenge has always been DPs. And because you never, you don't pick your DP, obviously, in TV. And one of my go-to things when I first get a job is like having drinks or dinner with my DP early, before prep starts. I get there like a few days early and just really try to, ingratiate myself with not only the DP, but also the AD. Because I feel like if I'm cool with both of those two people, my shoot will go really, really well. The AD will kind of give me the lay of the land, sometimes DP as well. Tell me who's really in control, who's the top of the hierarchy. Because sometimes it's not the showrunner, sometimes it's the producing director, sometimes it's the producer. And just knowing the politics is really helpful, but also just knowing, just having somebody that's on my side is really, really important when you're in an environment where you're the guest, and you need to learn what the unspoken rules are, so that's what I do.
Anybody else?
I'm not sure how to talk about my experiences politically well, so I'm sitting this one out.
Fair.
I'll give one. I haven't had a bunch of bad experiences. This happened on my very first episode. I was dealing with a difficult actor, and it seemed to be coming from nowhere. It was like all of this just kind of, everything was smooth except when it came to this particular person. And I couldn't get it. I mean, I'm a pretty easygoing person. I don't come into lots of conflicts. So it was just very strange. And I'm just getting this energy, and like, people are noticing it. So they're talking to the producers about it. Coming to find out, this actor wanted to direct and they weren't allowed to direct. And so every person who came in with less than 50 credits, they gave a hard time. And the lesson that I learned about this, especially as a guest director, is to, if you can, try your very best not to take things personally. Because a lot of times these things are, DP things or, producer things. All of this stuff is happening. You're coming in late. You don't know the full story of what's happening in all of these situations. And what I was getting had nothing to do with my performance or my preparation or my ability or my vision. It was all baked in before I got there. So for me, it was really about just focusing on what I had to accomplish in this episode. And that's telling the story of the episode, and maybe ignoring things or maybe addressing things if you needed to directly. But like realizing that it's not always a personal thing when you come into challenges or conflicts in episodic television. So that's what I took out of that situation.
It's so
I like that.
wide.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please go.
No, go.
I was literally, because I've never been outside of a space that I wasn't in, and sort of being in that environment. It's interesting because on our side of things, on the producer side of things, we ask during the process, whoever the writer is on set, we get the lay of the land. How is the director doing? How is the cast feeding? Like, we're texting constantly back and forth. once it's done, we check in with everyone. Is this someone we bring back? Did you have a good experience? We don't tell them to talk to each other. We go to each department and see how they interact with that department. And we would get back either just like, oh, this person is great. So, you know, wonderful, warm, blah, 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 and all that. And then we would get situations where it was just sort of like, I don't know if this person was particularly prepared, or this person, you know, there are so many things that we would get back and we would make decisions based on that. And so we had about 4 experiences, I will never forget them, that were just sort of like very much red flags. And I don't know where that person ended up going on and working again, if that happened. It was just sort of like, this was a terrible idea to have done. And it was just sort of, I was not on set with those individuals, but it was something that everyone knew. So it's like, Dan, from what happened there, I have a sense of what would happen in the writer's room. Everyone would know about that. You know what I mean? Everyone would be talking about that. And then the question ends up becoming, you can't lose your actor. Then you're now thinking, do we bring Dan back? Is it a Dan? Like, you know what I mean? All of a sudden it's a you thing as opposed to what that actor was going through. So it's just, it's good to see the 2 sides, you know, because it's like, there's always a color on it. And a lot of times now I'm like, maybe those guest directors were bumping up against someone who was feeling some type of way about something. And that's how come we got back this reception that we got, this feedback that we got back that may not have been based on truth, frankly.
I mean, one thing I noticed just coming up in the TV world as an assistant, especially assistant in the writer's office, is like the perception of how the director did is often more important than their director's cut.
Their actual cut.
It's like, what's the talk? Like, what are people saying? What
are they saying? Yeah, 100%. Like in a way that I don't know if that's a good thing, but it definitely was. It was definitely that. It was like, there was just a conversation about it, especially if there was someone and it was their first time on that particular show. Everyone was particularly like, okay, is this somebody we can add? Because I think the goal always is to have a roster of people who have been doing this multiple times for that particular. We love bringing people back. It was just so great when you're by, you know, season 6 and you've brought back someone every season. It just feels like a family then. But it was always very unfortunate whenever you would hear the bad feedback in that way that, yeah.
So navigating this career as a person of color or a woman of color, have you guys run into, what kind of situations, if any, have you guys run into as she sips her water? Situations have you run into? You know, I have a group of friends that we joke about directing while Black, and you have to like there's always that incident where you have to, the people are like, you can't park here, you can't park here, you can't park here. And you're like, yes, I can park here. And then they realize you're the director. Like, oh yeah, I'm
so
sorry.
Apologetic.
Yeah, cool.
So apologetic.
You know, like, you know, so other than the parking, which seems to happen to all of us at some point, where they're like, you can't park here. It's like, that's my name. That see the name right there? That's me.
Look at the call sheet. That's me.
Have there been situations that you guys find yourself where it actually becomes not, I hate to say an issue, but where people are not, like, I know that I found myself on shows, especially when I was a younger, newer director, having to, I would say my first day of prep wasn't prep, it was putting on a show, which was asking all the right questions to the right department head so that they knew that I knew what the fuck I was doing. I'm sorry, what the heck I was doing. So that she's asking smart questions. She understands what's going on versus people who, you know, because they'll start coming in and trying to break things down to you. And you're like, I've done this before, but have you run into this, or people staying, you know, irresponsible or not cool things on set? You guys run into that?
Yes.
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 All the time.
And so like, how do you do you just shake it off?
It's different for every situation. Unfortunately, I will say that the only situation where I have not ever had to deal with that is on Ava's set because she requires that. But on one of my shows, and I usually have an issue with the AD. On one of my recent shows, sorry guys, I have really bad allergies, but on one of my recent shows, the AD yelled at me in front of everybody and I had to, like, it was terrible. I took him to the side actually, he yelled at me in front of everyone. And then it was in response to a question I was asking him. And he was like, why are you being argumentative? Why are you doing this? Da, 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 da. Which, you know, it's like a typical thing you say to Black women. And I realized in the moment, and this takes like sophisticated, like both diplomacy, but also racial awareness, that in that moment, it wouldn't have made sense for me to defend myself. I just kind of kept it moving. And then I took him to the side later on and said, you can't talk to me like that in front of people. You know, it's totally fine if we have different styles. It's fine if you have issues with me, but you need to come and talk to me privately. And he was like, I wasn't yelling at you. Da, da, da. And I was like, yeah, PAs and other people from across the room came over and told me. And thankfully for me, I had a producer that was on set that had my back. And, you know, he was like, this has happened to me. And this is like a big time producer. He's like, this has happened to me multiple times. Like white ADs, like really have a hard time when there's a Black person who has more power than them. I then found out later on that that AD wanted to be a director.
It's always that.
Had literally
always
sent that producer, right? Had that with editors too. Literally had sent the producer like a video, a short film of his the weekend before. And then because that showrunner was Black, I did feel comfortable going to the showrunner and saying, listen, this is having an effect on me being able to do my job. And the showrunner was like, you should tell me immediately once this, because it started with snarkiness and then it elevated to the yelling. And he was like, you should tell me that immediately so that I could cut it off. I will say that if it's like a non-Black show, or if the showrunner doesn't feel like simpatico, I would not go to them. I have, I'm in the DGA Women's Steering Committee squad. And so that I think also for Black directors, it's extremely helpful to have like a support team outside of the job that you can like people with different levels of experience. So like I had a Black woman in my squad tell me, you know, don't worry about that. Focus on talking about the performances and not how you like ended the day 2 hours early, because what might happen is that even though you're in the right, they'll remember you as the director that was having a hard time. And so there are all sorts of nuances to how to navigate these things that it's been necessary that I had other people who knew more than me to consult.
100% mentors are super, super, super helpful. Super, super helpful. Yeah, I had a situation on one show where the camera operator just would always question me. The camera operator had more power than the DP on the show. And at first he questioned my shots, and then he started screaming at me and saying like, that makes no sense. Why are we doing that? Why are we using this lens? Why are we making this move? And, you know, by this point we were on day 10 of 12, you know, so, you know, I couldn't go to the producer. I luckily had a producer that was watching and saw what was happening the entire time and had my back. But, you know, if I didn't have my mentor to call and talk to about how to handle the situation, it could have easily gotten out of control. So yeah, every situation is different. So it's really important to have like a mentor that you could call whenever.
Let's talk about that. I mean, not just mentors, but like tell a story of, like, I think everybody who's made it as far as we have has at least one story of someone who went out of their way to help them up, to reach down and pull them up, right? Tell me a story about someone who didn't have to do it, that did you a solid, that helped you, that helped you either level up or helped you smooth something over or whatever.
Well, I'll just jump in if you don't mind. I had a producing director. This is a different mentor than my normal mentor, but I reached out to him for advice on something about a job that I wasn't sure I was going to take, and he ended up in that conversation ended up offering me an episode on his show, and didn't have to interview, didn't have to talk to the showrunner, didn't have to do anything, but he had that kind of power on the show. And when I was on the show, he had already talked to all the department heads and really just was like, you know, this is my boy, like, you know, do him a solid, respect him, he's me. So it was a very, very different set than any other set that I had ever been on. So that's my experience with the mentor.
For me, it was Debbie Allen. I used to think I was special that I had a Debbie Allen story, but as it turns out, there are thousands of people in Hollywood who she's pulled up. She was or still is the producing director on Grey's. She only knew me as an assistant. And I showed her some of my work and she became my advocate. And she created space for me to shadow on that show. She hired me for my first directing episode, even though I ended up directing somewhere else first. She was tough. She was hard on me. She tested me. She made sure I was ready before putting me in that position. But she's the one who started my career. So for that, I'm always grateful.
Mine's Ava DuVernay. She's done that to like countless directors, but after I did my feature film, that I considered as my work, and then she matched my work. I don't like to think about it as like pulling me up, because I feel like that's what, especially if you're Black and a Black woman, that's what we should all be doing, as opposed to sort of a like, I don't know what the word is, like, oh yes, you helped me up. But it was Ava. I mean, nobody else has, like literally nobody else has done that. And I'm still a new TV director, so I still have to like prove myself and do all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I know you say it should, but I've heard like, I think it was George Lopez or something in an interview, and he was bad mouthing some comedian. And the guy's like, why don't you help this dude out? He's like, dude, like, I like my job. Like, why would I help him? And it's like, no, there's room for all of us. Like, I know there's jobs that I've gotten called for when and Daniel can attest, we're in a little chat group that I'm like, I can't do this. Who's this guy's looking for somebody, so everybody knows, because there's room for everybody. And yeah, I mean, sometimes a friend might get a job that I wanted. And yeah, I might be like, damn it, for like 5 seconds, but then the rest of the time I'm like, all right, because if they win, then I'll always win, because then I know that's another group of people that's never going to doubt hiring a Black person or a Black woman again. I remember I was when I was still a second AD, I was on a show that had fairly liberal producers that were white liberal producers, and it was the most diverse crew I'd been on that wasn't a Black show, right? That didn't have like a main cast. And I overheard them talking about they wanted to hire this Black woman director, but there was this other Black woman on another show that didn't do well. And they were using that as a reason why they maybe wouldn't hire this other one. And I'm like, we had a white dude that shit the bed like 2 months ago. We still hired white dudes. Like, what's going on? Like, but that weighed on me. So I think part of like, of wanting to like be a director, it was hard just to shake that off. Like the weight of I have to do good or somebody else is not gonna get a job. Where I think once I flipped it of like, once I get this job, no one's ever gonna doubt hiring a Black woman on this show ever again, because I'm gonna kill it. And so every time one of us gets a job out there, I'm like, that they're gonna kill it. They're gonna kill it. It's like spreading the word. Like, don't be scared. We got talent. We're talented. We're out there. So I don't know. For me, I think once we all should, like, I agree. We all should lift everybody up, but not everybody out there agrees with that philosophy.
So I love that. I love that. I like, because I didn't sort of present as someone who wanted to be a TV director, but my boss, Dan, who created This Is Us, is someone who I have loved and will love forever and ever. And he's just someone who I started on that show as a staff writer, and I moved up, wildly so through the course of the 6.5 years that we were doing it. And it was just because there was he always was aware of what I was doing. And he was always incredibly supportive. A lot of times you're in a space where you're working, you're giving your 1000%, your heart and soul is in something, but that work goes overlooked, especially if your showrunner doesn't share any background with you. And Dan is as white and as Jewish as the day is long. 2 things, white, male, and Jewish. 3 things I am not, I'm the complete opposite of, but this is someone who we just bonded in such an intense way. And so he was the one who I remember, it was like season 5, where he was like, I want you to direct. And so it wasn't a thing I never asked. I would not even know how to ask that question or say that out loud. That's like an insane thing. but I had produced so many episodes and I was on set and I loved being on set and I loved our crew. And I always wanted to sort of make sure I was like the person who like, because sometimes emails are weird for people and they don't tell the costume department too, or like early enough. They don't tell props early enough. And so I would always be like diming out everybody's apartment so everyone was aware of something. So for whatever reason, by like season 3, I was like, if you needed to know something, call Kay. If you wanted a bridge between the writer's room and production, I would make that connection just because I knew how everyone needed information basically. And so he was the one who lobbied for that and just said like, I want you to do it. And I was like, I wasn't in the DGA. That was not even a purview. So I ended up like, he reached out to NBC for their NBC, like their for like Women Forward program and was like, and he had seen, I directed 2 shorts at that point, but I'm not a big, like, I don't know how to like, I would never ask. That's what I would never ask. And he hadn't seen anything. So he was like, what have you done? I was like, well, I did do a short. I sent it to him. He was like, send it. He even emailed it to them. And so I got into that program and that's how I was able to sort of get the green light from the studio to go ahead and direct the episode. But it was really like such an advocate in a way that he became an advocate more so than I'm an advocate for myself. And so it was just sort of, he's always been such a source of joy as a mentor. And I love having mentors who will force you to be the better version of who you are and see things in you that you may not have seen at that point in yourself.
Very cool. Has everybody here done the I heard Kay, you said you did a program, one of the directing programs. Tchaiko, you did.
I did.
We want to talk a little bit about your experience going through these different studio directing programs. I know everyone seems to be a little different in terms of who they're looking for and whether or not you get a job or not and all that kind of stuff. We just want to talk a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, I'll talk about mine. I mean, I have a great affection for the Sony program because that was super helpful. That in combination with what I was doing on my own and trying to build my network and making things on the side, all of that worked together to get me started. But it's like, they're tough. They're lotteries. They're super political. Like there's a lot more going on beyond just, sending in your application. So there's that part, but also it provided me an opportunity once I got in to shadow on a show. And I got to shadow on a show that didn't like shadows. So I came into a very aggressive place that wasn't really keen on me being there. But that program opened the door for me to be whatever I was, where I got hired the very next season on that show. So I feel like if you can work it, like if you have the personality, if you have the wherewithal to kind of like be in that space and, make the phone calls and take the general meetings and try to make yourself stand out in a way where you can be selected into one of those programs and you really work it once you get in, it could be beneficial. But I always tell people, make that one prong of your multi-prong effort to kind of build a career.
And that Sony was the one you did?
Yes, I did Sony. I got into a few others, but I started to work. So Sony is the only one that I completed.
Yeah, I did ABC. It was ABC Disney back then, and then Fox. And
I received my rejection from the ABC program while I was on set directing Grey's Anatomy. So that was pretty fun.
That's funny. That's funny.
You'd have to like make that like a thing, like a poster or something. That's really funny.
You're right about the political part of it. I said I launched a propaganda campaign to get me into the program because it was 2000, I think 14 or 16 or whatever, but I knew I had I did it every 2 years. So I knew I had like another year before I could even apply. And so, you're on set, you were an assistant, I was an AD. So like you meet other execs and stuff. And so I would just start asking like, hey, do you know any of the people who are in this program? And everybody knew, either Tim, Janine, or Emerlyn. And they're like, oh yeah, do you want me to call? And I'd be like, yes, but I'm going to tell you when. So I literally timed it out so that they got a call or an email about me like every 2 months up until my thing came through. Yep. And then they're like, oh yeah, we've heard about you. I'm like, oh really? Like,
yep. You have to.
That's
awesome.
But that was what I had to do to get in, so that they even paid attention, because there's stacks. Everybody applies. Just to be one of the ones they look at more than just glance at. You have to know somebody, it feels like. But ABC wasn't that. ABC, we had like a meeting. We met everybody once, and then they just sent us off to shadow. And again, it was like you said, hostile set, people that didn't even know who we were when we got there.
Sony's
Directors who
crazy.
didn't know that they were going to be shadowed.
Yeah.
Like,
Sony's crazy because they chose like 15 people, but only 5 people got to shadow. So they created this like Hunger Games situation during like the professional development piece. So everybody's trying to ask the right question and trying to stand out in a way. Well, you'll be one of the even smaller group of people who got to shadow. So I don't know that that's the best way to approach it. I don't think that like encourages team building and community building, but
the NBC fellowship set, like when you apply and you get on, the first thing they do is match you before you even go through the workshops and like anything like that. So people, it was weird because when we did it was 2020 class. So the pandemic hit. So a lot of shows weren't allowing extra bodies on set because of all the COVID protocols. So a couple of people didn't get to do their show until like the next year, but everyone knew they had a show. And the year before, which was the first year, everyone got to I think it was like 9 people the first year, everyone got to shadow and everyone got an episode. So like the NBC Female Forward program guarantees you a show and guarantees you an episode. And that's one of the big draws for joining it. But like we had these like weekly panels, we had executives come, actors come, editors come, DPs come, and everyone would just sort of walk you through. It's kind of like a version of what happens when you join the DGA, like that first where like, Paris like does his whole thing, but you do that over the course of several weeks. But yeah, everyone had a thing. I think one person couldn't do it because like the show was like Superstore and I was like its last season. And because of COVID, they just never got a chance to be on set, but everyone was guaranteed one.
so is everybody here shadowed other directors? Yes. Maybe. Yeah. So let's talk about that. When people get an opportunity to shadow, what are some, like, I know things that I've seen, like when I was ADing too, that were things like not to do. Let's talk a little bit of like, what are the things that we can do? Like when if someone gets a chance to shadow a director, how to make the most out of that situation, and then what are some like don'ts as well?
I think like I was in the ABC program as well, and I was lucky because my very first director was very eager to have me and treated me like her name was Jet Wilkinson. She's been around the block. Yeah, a great person, but very intense, and like every single day she would, in prep and in production, she would turn to me and ask me a question to make sure I was listening. So I think like approaching shadowing as if you're directing, they tell us this all the time, is the best way to go through it. Prepping the same way the director does. If you're in a meeting, what would you say in that situation? Did my AirPods go out? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, just like treating every situation as if you're the director, but never actually saying anything out loud is a good way to go through it. Also, just knowing when to not bother the director versus, like at the beginning of my shadowing experience, I had a conversation with Jet and I was like, okay, what time of day is good for me to ask my questions? And she would say, at this time every single day, I'm open, my mind is free and we could talk, but other times just observe and write down your questions and kind of keep note. But yeah, I think in general, just approaching it as if you're directing is the best way to go through it, because that's the only time you'll ever get a chance to practice, because once you actually get a job, it's your ass is on the line, so yeah.
I'd say take the shadow part literally, like remain in the shadows. I think the instinct is to like wait for your moment to like talk to the producer or like show them your binder of all the work that you've done. And I feel like that backfires more often than not. I feel like you have to just trust the process and say, hey, you're here. Number one, once you're there, everybody knows that you're there. Everybody's wondering why you're there and how you got there. So you don't have to seek out attention in any way. I remember when I was on Blacklist, which was the show that wasn't really big on shadows. I remember the producer came up to me and they said, you're the quietest shadow I've ever met. And I was like, well, just here to observe. Now, I didn't have to say, I was prepping just like Bethany Rooney was. She was the person who I was with, I was doing everything that she was doing, and she was testing me, and we were doing all this, but I didn't have to advertise all of that. I just kind of remained back and just kind of observed and took everything in. And I think that can go a long way for sure.
It's tricky though, because I was on a show where the director, who's actually a dude who's like, no, I'm not gonna say who it was, but I was about to out him because it still makes me mad, even though it was a long time ago. But was like, hey, it was the last episode of the season. He had a show in development that he was trying to work on. He's like, I'm gonna be crazy. Don't ask me any questions unless wait till the end of the day to ask me questions. I'm not gonna have a lot of time. So I was like, great. So I asked everybody else questions. I asked the actors actor questions. I asked the producers writing questions. I asked, whatever. And then when my team heard back, they're like, oh no, she didn't ask. He told her that she didn't ask any questions.
What?
And I'm like, I only asked him like the questions that only the director could answer, which were some were a little technical or whatever. It's like, she asked AD questions. She's stuck in being an AD. And I'm like, I asked all the creative stuff to the writers, and because you told me to leave you alone. So like, you don't know. I always say, talk to the onset dresser though. The onset dresser is a department of one, and they see everything, and they just want to be heard. And they'll tell you all the tea. They'll spill all the tea just for like, just because they've been waiting to say what they hate about everybody, or what they like too, but the onset dresser is always mad cool to share. All right, so we're wrapping it up here. Let's get to like advice. What's the best advice that you were given, and what advice would you like to pass on to those watching today? Wow, everybody just went.
I'm trying to think. My first instinct is like Hollywood advice. I'm trying to think of directing advice. So let me.
It can be me either. I mean, I'll start while y'all marinate. I was a first AD for a long time. Kim Whittingham, who's a really well-known director, I was his second AD, his last first AD job, right? So I was always like, I'm coming after you, Ken. I'll be just like you. I'm gonna go off and direct all this cool stuff. And he's like, when you have to direct, you have to stop doing your other job. You can't keep the one toe in. But like, I don't have a trust fund. So he's like, what you need to do is work on stuff, like don't work on like the hit show. Work on the stuff that'll pay your bills, stay in the cut. And if you can work for the same people over and over again, do that. So that way only they know you're still working in that. And that's what I did. I moved to Atlanta. And so anytime I had a meeting and stuff, they only knew me as a director, except for BET, because I did a bunch of BET stuff here in Atlanta. And they were like the hardest ones to get me they would always have to fight to get me episodes on stuff, because they saw me as a certain way. I remember one time they made the showrunner had to be on set if I was going to direct. And I'm like, you realize I'm the one who you guys charge with making sure that the new directors don't shit the bed, right? So why are you having me sitting a babysitter for me when literally I'm the one you trust to take care of everything when everyone's gone? But it's in their head, I was still just an AD. They didn't see it. So, and it's, but you get used to, you get used to people doing a certain thing. I mean, assistant, same thing. When she stopped being an assistant, and I'm just like, I'm happy to see her go, but I have to stop myself to call her and ask her some bullshit, So, all right, what advice did you guys get, and what advice do you guys want to give?
So last year when I was in the DGA WSC squad, my mentor, Don Wilkinson, was a Black Canadian director and also a mom. Who knew Don? Angela? I
know Don.
Yeah. Dawn was so amazing because her advice that she gave me was like tangible. She was like, pick like a couple different shows or like networks that you're interested in. She was like, Freeform is good because they because I want to get into genre. She's like, they have a genre and they don't pay as much as other networks, so that might be a place where you could get in. Like, so you work on these three things, have your agent get you meetings with the studio, with the network, and it was sort of just like a plan of how I could get in. And there's another piece of advice she gave me. Another director who I knew from Film Fatales told me, every general meeting or any meeting that you have, try to get another meeting out of it. So do research to see. So like, for example, somebody that I met for one network, and I wanted to meet Berlanti people, like, because I knew different, things about her. It's like, oh, if you're comfortable, I would love to meet with XYZ. And so that's how I got my meeting with Berlanti. Yeah.
That's good advice.
I don't have any advice of my own to give, except for have very good friends. Because so much about it, I think, for me, is persistence and not giving up and being able to have like a healthy point of view on things, because it's pretty tough.
That's good advice. Because it doesn't happen overnight. So it's being patient and persistent, I think, is good. Yeah.
I think so advice that I got once was to treat every department head like their department was the most important. And I think that is huge. Number one, it's true. I feel like, especially coming into a space that's not your space, it's like you want to respect what they've done, what they're doing, and show them that you appreciate their contribution and that it matters. It's like you don't want to be like sending makeup away because you're annoyed that they're trying to come in and make the actors look how they should. You need to just kind of give credit to everyone for what they're doing. We're not painters, we're filmmakers, right? So this isn't a solo exercise. Everybody comes together to make the thing special. And then for me, my advice is don't compare yourself to your peers and your friends and the people who are doing this, because everybody's on their own journey, everybody's on their own path. It's like don't look around too much, just kind of focus on what you're doing and make a plan for yourself, and that'll save you a lot of heartache probably.
I just want to piggyback off what you said about the departments. Another thing that I do is when I get the job, I research the crew to see what they've done before, to see if there are things that I can, when I meet them, instead of just saying, hi, I'm Tchaiko, blah, 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 but like giving them a compliment on, a genuine compliment on work that they've done, or maybe a shot that they did in previous episodes, especially the camera operator. But yeah.
Good advice. For me, I was always told, well, I heard this from one or two directors in terms of generals. You could just kind of go into a general and vibe with the other person, but a good way to go into a general is to know what that exec covers. And you're not asking for an interview for the show that they're working on, but just kind of subtly through your self-introduction, drop reasons why you'd be a good fit for instance, us. Like I do shows about, I'm really interested in identity, and not fitting in. And I lived in Japan, and the part of the reason I lived in Japan is because I was really attracted to that culture is all about trying to fit into a tribe, trying to like belong, and if you just drop small hints about who you are and what you believe in, then that person will organically say, okay, maybe that person would be a good fit for X, Y, or Z show. So you don't just kind of just willy-nilly go into a general. You kind of go into this general with an agenda to at least, get that exec to start thinking of you for that show. So that's something that I've always kept in mind. But my own personal advice is to know your brand, like know what kind of director you are, what kind of stories you want to tell. Because we're all TV directors, but we all have like I think we're good at something specific. Like I'm really good at, sensitive, introspective storytelling. That's kind of like my thing. Identity, fitting in, that's my thing, And so I'm only gonna go for shows that kind of fit that brand, because I'm gonna really stand out if I'm in an interview with the showrunner. They're gonna vibe off of that passion and that strength that I have. So
I love that. It's advice that I was given in a different field, weirdly enough, that sort of is applicable here. My previous life, I was a journalist. And then the notion there, just because everyone in that pool, and this was in New York, I worked for the Today Show, everyone knew each other. Like my bosses had been there for 25 years and they all knew each other. And one of the things that I heard early on was just sort of let every single thing someone says about you be the same thing, because you are the same person wherever you go. It's that sense that like in this way that, I don't like to think of it like your reputation, that's neither here nor there, but it really is like, I remember Emmanuel from, gosh, Emmanuel, how many years ago was that when we met? It was just like, and I remember it was like, and I remember we emailed each other back and forth. I saw your short. I just thought it was fantastic. I don't even know if I was like an assistant at BBC or some, at Searchlight or something, because it feels like over 10 years ago at this point, but it's just sort of like, the people are what matters rather than the gigs, because the gigs will come and go. All that This Is Us is over. It's not coming back, but it's like, are you still who you were when you were there and outside of that? Like, let be the person that you are, so that whatever anyone has to say about you, at least is consistent. What I've seen is like, there's someone who one person didn't like and another person did. And then that person who had a bad experience with them felt like deeply even more offended, because they were like, maybe it was me, since this other person just was great with them. So it's that notion that like, if it's bad, let it be bad across the board. If it's good, let it be good across the board. Just be consistently consistent, so that, it's consistent. And then my advice to other people, it will be the same advice anywhere. Pray. I don't know what anybody is holding on to, but if you are not praying, I don't know what to tell you. Pray again, pray before, during, and after. Pray, because there is nothing that we can do without God. So that's my advice across the board. Pray and pray and pray. Because yeah.
Especially during production.
Exactly, especially
You can't control the way people think about you and
at all.
But I think, Kate, what you were saying, like, is be the same person. But I think for self-care and self-protection, it's up to you how much of that person you reveal to everybody. Yeah, because I always said like Atlanta was the one show that I was 100% Angela. Like other shows, I might get to 85, 90%. But there was only one show in 25 years on sets that I've ever been 100% me. And it was obvious, it was a show that was a very feminine, even if it was all dudes in charge, it was still a very feminist, very chill set. Like it was like the only job I've never been second guessed or mansplained, where we would just have like the pilot. I was the first AD for the pilot, and my entire team, except for one dude, was one PA, because we're like, oh shoot, we need someone to lift the heavy stuff. So we hired one dude as the PA. And it was great, and it was just super, super chill. But like, I think I like that, staying consistent in terms of who you are. So how much of that you share with the world.
It's not about anybody else. It really is. And I think it's a little bit of what you were saying, Emmanuel, which is sort of like that brand, whether you call it brand, personality, whatever it is, it's just sort of like hone that, you know what I mean? Take the time to hone that, because to what everybody has said, you will come against people who are like, what you said, Dan, about the actor who was giving you some kind of energy. It's like, if you know what I mean? Like, who you are is going to be who you are wherever you go, and grow that person. Let that person be consistent, because these streets is nuts. So don't base it off of that. You know what I mean? It's like Tuesday and Wednesday could be 2 different days for many different reasons. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. Guys watching, please tune into other Creative Conference interviews and panels. There's a bunch of them out there. Check them out, and have a beautiful day.
Thank you. It was nice to be in conversation with y'all.
Bye, y'all.